You said yes again, didn't you? You said yes when everything inside you was whispering no. You felt it, that small sinking feeling in your chest, that quiet contraction of your spirit, and you ignored it. You smiled, you nodded. You agreed to something that will cost you time, you don't have energy, you can't spare, a piece of yourself you'll never get back. And here's what's fascinating. You probably don't even remember when this started. It's become so automatic that you don't notice it anymore. The way you scan every face for signs of approval, the way you adjust your opinions to match the room, the way you've learned to make yourself smaller, softer, more agreeable, so that no one will ever be disappointed in you. You've spent years, maybe decades, building a life designed around one question: what do they want from me? And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking a different question, a more important question. What do I want from myself? I want you to really hear what I'm about to say. Not just understand it intellectually, but let it penetrate somewhere deeper. You have been living in exile from your own life. You show up, you perform, you accommodate, you twist yourself into whatever shape seems safest. But the person doing all that performing, that's not really you. That's a character you created, someone designed to be acceptable, to never cause friction, to earn love through endless accommodation. And the real you, the one with actual preferences and genuine limits and a wild, sacred interior life, that person has been waiting, patiently, quietly, wondering when you'll finally come home. What if the very thing you've been calling kindness, this compulsion to please, to shape yourself around others' expectations, what if it's actually the deepest form of self-betrayal? What if every time you erase your own needs to gain approval, you're not being generous at all, you're being absent? Absent from your own precious, unrepeatable life. This matters now. Not someday when you have more time, not when the circumstances are easier, now. Because every day you spend seeking the approval of others is a day you spend in exile from yourself. Let me show you how this lives in your daily experience. And I want you to be honest with yourself as I describe this. Not harsh, not judgmental, just quietly honest. Think about the last time someone asked you for a favor. Maybe a coworker needed you to cover their shift. Maybe a family member needed you to drop everything and help with something that wasn't actually urgent. Maybe a friend wanted your time, your attention, your energy for the third time that week. And before you even considered your own needs, your own schedule, your own limits, you said yes. The word came out of your mouth before you'd consulted yourself. Before you'd asked, do I actually have the capacity for this? Is this something I genuinely want to offer? Or am I just afraid of what they'll think if I say no? You know this pattern. You've lived it 1,000 times. And here's what you tell yourself afterward. I'm just being a good person. Good people sacrifice. Good people put others first. Good people don't make waves. But notice what's actually happening beneath that story. You're not making these choices from a place of genuine generosity, from an overflow of love that naturally wants to give. You're making them from fear. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of being disliked. Fear of that terrible moment when someone's face falls in disappointment and you feel deep in your bones that you've failed somehow. You've learned somewhere along the way that your worth is conditional, that you must earn your place in the world through ceaseless accommodation. That love is not something you deserve simply by existing, it's something you purchase through performance. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself where you learned this? Maybe there was a parent whose approval you could never quite secure. A parent who loved you more when you were useful, agreeable, invisible in your own needs. Maybe there was an early relationship where you discovered that having preferences led to conflict and conflict led to abandonment. Maybe you grew up in a home where someone else's emotions always took up all the space and you learned to make yourself small just to survive. You adapted. You had to. Children are brilliant at figuring out what's required to stay safe and loved. And the strategy you develop, this constant monitoring of others, this endless accommodation, this erasure of self, it worked. It kept you connected. But here's what no one told you. Strategies that help us survive childhood often become prisons in adulthood. What once protected you is now diminishing you. What once kept you safe is now keeping you in exile from your own life. Picture a woman named Eleanor. She's 54 years old, successful by every external measure. Good career, nice home, family that depends on her. Friends who call her reliable, generous, always there when you need her. But Eleanor has a secret. Every morning she wakes up exhausted before the day has even begun. There's a heaviness in her chest that never quite lifts. She moves through her days like an actress who's forgotten why she took the role, hitting her marks, saying her lines, but feeling increasingly distant from the performance. Last month, Eleanor's daughter asked her a simple question. Mom, what do you actually want for your birthday? And Eleanor stood there, mouth slightly open, completely unable to answer. Not because she was being modest, but because she genuinely didn't know. She had spent so many years organizing her desires around other people's needs that she'd lost access to her own. When was the last time you really knew what you wanted? Not what would make others comfortable, not what would avoid conflict, not what seemed acceptable or reasonable, but what you actually genuinely wanted for yourself. This is what years of self-abandonment do. They don't just exhaust you, they disconnect you from your own inner knowing. The voice that says, I want this, or I don't want that, that voice gets quieter and quieter until you can barely hear it. And then one day, someone asks what you want and you realize you've become a stranger to yourself. Think about your closest relationships right now. The ones where you work hardest to please. The ones where you're most careful about what you say, how you act, what needs you reveal. Are those the relationships where you feel most loved, most seen, most at peace? Or are they the relationships where you feel most anxious, where you're always slightly off balance, always wondering if you've done enough, always scanning for signs that you've fallen short? Here's what I've observed over many years. The relationships where you perform the most are rarely the relationships where you're loved the most. They're the relationships where you're used the most, where your accommodation has been mistaken for unlimited availability, where your lack of boundaries has been interpreted as an invitation to take. Think about the people in your life who seem to need the most from you. When was the last time those people asked how you were doing? Not as a formality, genuinely asked, and then listened. When was the last time they offered you the same unlimited accommodation they've come to expect from you? The relationships built on your people-pleasing are often remarkably one-directional. You give, they receive. And everyone has agreed, without ever discussing it, that this is just how things are. Here's what nobody tells you about people-pleasing. It doesn't work. You can twist yourself into 1,000 shapes, trying to fit what others want, and there will always be someone disappointed. I remember receiving a letter once after speaking to 1,000 people. One person wrote that the talk did not live up to her expectations. 1,000 people, 1,000 different sets of expectations. How could anyone meet completely all of those varied and intimate and unique expectations? It's impossible. And when you try to do the impossible, you don't become more loved. You become more exhausted, more resentful, more distant from your own inner knowing. You have to dance to the music you hear. And I invite you to start listening for your own music again. Now I want to go deeper with you. Because understanding the pattern isn't enough. You need to understand the mechanism that keeps you trapped. Your ego has a fascinating strategy. It tells you that your worth comes from outside yourself, that you are fundamentally incomplete as you are, that there's a hole in you that can only be filled by the approval of others. And if you can just get enough people to approve of you, to need you, to validate your existence, then finally you'll feel whole. But notice the trap. If your worth depends on the approval of others, then you must be controlled by others. Their moods become your moods. Their opinions become your truth. Their disappointment becomes your emergency. You've handed the key to your inner peace to anyone who walks by and then wondered why you feel so unstable. This is bondage, not chains on your body, chains on your soul. You've become a leaf in the wind of other people's reactions. And leaves in the wind don't get to choose their direction. But here's what changes everything. Your worth cannot be verified by others. Let that sink past the surface of your mind into somewhere deeper. Your worth is not a verdict the world hands down after reviewing your performance. Your worth is not increased by approval or diminished by disappointment. Your worth is a recognition of what you already are, what you've always been before you learned to doubt it. You came into this world as a perfect expression of something sacred. Not perfect in the sense of flawless performance, that's the ego's definition, and it's a lie. Perfect in the sense of complete. Whole! lacking nothing essential. You didn't arrive needing to earn your place. You arrived already belonging. The people-pleasing pattern operates on a fundamental lie, that you are incomplete without the approval of others, that you must constantly audition for your right to exist, but you don't audition for something you already have. You don't earn what has already been given. Think about a 2-year-old child. Watch how she moves through the world. There is no performance, no careful calculation of what others want, no scanning for approval before expressing a desire. There is only this moment, this feeling, this complete and unself-conscious engagement with life. That child doesn't wonder whether she deserves to take up space. She simply takes it. She doesn't wonder whether her needs are valid. She simply expresses them. She doesn't question whether she belongs here. She knows she does. You were that child once. Before you learned that love was conditional. Before you learned that your worth depended on your usefulness. Before you learned to monitor every face for signs that you were acceptable. That child is still in you. That original, unconditioned self, the one who knew, without anyone telling her, that she belonged here, that she was enough. The work of transformation isn't about becoming someone new, it's about returning to who you were before you learned to abandon yourself. This is the part most people miss entirely. When you override your own truth to please others, when you say yes but mean no, when you pretend to have no preferences, when you shapeshift to match expectations, you're not just exhausting yourself. You're lying. You're presenting a false self. And relationships built on a false self are not real relationships. They're performances that both parties have agreed to mistake for connection. The ego tells you this dishonesty keeps you safe. That if people saw the real you, the one with needs and limits and inconvenient truths, they would reject you. But consider this. If someone only loves the performance, they don't actually love you. They love a character you created. And maintaining that character requires you to stay in permanent exile, present in body but absent in soul. What would happen if you stopped performing? Some people might leave, this is true. Some people have a vested interest in the accommodating version of you, the one who never has needs, who makes no demands. When that version disappears, those people may decide they're no longer interested. And I need you to hear this. That is not a loss. That is a revelation. It reveals that the relationship was never about you. It was about what you provided. The people who stay, the ones who can handle your boundaries, your full humanity, those are the people capable of actually loving you. And being loved for who you actually are is worth infinitely more than being approved of for a performance that cost you your soul. Let me tell you about 2 paths I've watched people take. The first belongs to a man I'll call Richard. Richard spent 30 years in a career that impressed everyone except himself. His parents were proud, his colleagues respected him, but every Sunday evening, a darkness settled over him that wouldn't lift until Friday. Richard knew he was living someone else's idea of a successful life. There were paths he'd never explored because exploring them might disappoint people. His wife said, stay, the income was good. His parents said stay, they'd sacrifice for his education. Everyone had reasons why Richard should keep performing. And so Richard stayed. He retired at 65 with a pension and a vague sense that he had missed something essential. He had time now, endless time, but he had forgotten what he wanted to do with it. The second path belongs to a woman named Grace. Grace faced the same pressures, a stable career, family expectations, all the sensible reasons to stay in a life that was suffocating her. But Grace had learned something Richard never learned. The good opinion of others cannot compensate for the loss of your own soul. Grace left. She disappointed people. Her mother didn't speak to her for 6 months. She frightened people. She confused people. But Grace discovered something remarkable. She had energy again. She had enthusiasm. She woke up wanting to meet the day. She had been so depleted by performing someone else's life that she had forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely alive. The difference between Richard and Grace wasn't courage. It was this. Grace understood that her feelings of joy and peace weren't luxuries. They were guidance. They were the sacred speaking through her experience, pointing toward her true path. Richard had learned to ignore that guidance. He had learned that other people's comfort mattered more than his own aliveness. Your feelings are not inconveniences to be managed. They are information. They are your deepest self trying to communicate with you. And when you repeatedly override them to please others, you lose the ability to hear them at all. This is the real cost of people pleasing. Not just tiredness, not just resentment, but a gradual exile from the voice that knows your way. So what do you do? How do you begin the journey home? First, understand this is not about becoming selfish. There's a vast difference between narcissism and self-respect. Narcissism says, only my needs matter. Self-respect says, my needs matter too. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you give everything away, if you deplete yourself, chasing approval, you have nothing authentic left to offer. The exhausted, hollowed-out version of you isn't helpful to anyone. It's a half presence, a body in the room with a soul that checked out long ago. The most generous thing you can do is become whole. When you're rooted in your own worth, you can finally offer others something real. Not performance, not anxious accommodation, but actual presence, actual love. Here's what you do, starting now. This week, become an observer of yourself. Simply notice. Notice when you say yes, but feel no. Notice when you abandon your preference to avoid conflict. Notice the sensations in your body when you betray yourself, the tension in your jaw, the tightness in your chest, the hollow feeling in your stomach. Don't try to change anything yet, just observe. This is sacred work. Awareness is the doorway to everything else. You cannot change what you refuse to see. When you start observing, you'll be amazed at how often you abandon yourself. Dozens of times a day. Small moments you never noticed before. The opinion you didn't voice because it might cause friction. The preference you hid because it seemed easier to go along. The need you minimized because you didn't want to seem demanding. Each one, by itself, seems insignificant, but they accumulate. They compound. And over years and decades, they add up to a life lived at a distance from yourself. Next, practice this revolutionary act. Delay your response. When someone asks something of you, pause. You don't have to answer immediately. The urgency you feel? That's old programming demanding you accommodate before consulting yourself. See, let me think about that. This creates space for your own voice to emerge. Space to ask, is this aligned with my highest good? Or am I just afraid of their reaction? That pause is not rude. It is you finally treating your own needs as worthy of consideration. I want you to understand something important about this pause. For most of your life, you've been trained to respond instantly, to accommodate without thinking, to say yes before you've even registered what you're agreeing to. This instant response isn't generosity, it's a survival mechanism. It's your nervous system trying to prevent conflict before conflict can arise. But when you pause, something remarkable happens. You create a gap between the request and your response. And in that gap, your own voice can finally be heard. You can ask yourself what you actually want. You can notice how your body is responding. You can make a conscious choice instead of an automatic reaction. This pause will feel uncomfortable at first. The urgency to respond will be intense. You might worry that people will think you're being difficult or uncooperative. But what they'll actually notice is that you've become someone who thinks before committing, someone who takes their own time seriously, someone who can be trusted to mean what they say because they've actually considered it. Then practice saying no. Start small. The invitation you don't want, the favor that would deplete you. Say no kindly but clearly, without elaborate justification. Just this. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not going to be able to do that. Notice the fear that arises. The old story. They'll be angry. They'll leave. You're being selfish. These are old stories written by a child trying to stay safe. But you're not that child anymore. And those catastrophic predictions usually don't materialize. Most people accept your no and move on. They respect you more for having limits. Here's what I want you to understand about the word no. For people pleasers, no feels like a weapon. It feels aggressive, unkind, even dangerous. You've been trained to believe that saying no is the same as saying, I don't care about you or you don't matter to me. But that's not what no means. No simply means this particular request doesn't work for me right now. It's not a rejection of the person. It's not a statement about their worth. It's information about your capacity, your preferences, your limits. And sharing that information is actually more honest, more respectful than saying yes when you mean no. When you say yes but mean no, you're not being kind. You're being dishonest. You're making a promise you resent, and that resentment will leak out somehow. It always does. It shows up in your tone, your energy, your subtle withdrawal. The other person senses it, even if they can't name it. And the relationship suffers not because you said no, but because you said yes, without meaning it. A clear no is a gift. It lets people know where they actually stand with you. It allows them to make other arrangements. It preserves the relationship from the poison of unspoken resentment. And it teaches them that when you do say yes, you mean it. And when someone reacts badly to your boundary, when they punish you for having needs, you've learned something invaluable about who they are. They were never in relationship with you. They were in relationship with your compliance, starting today. Not someday, today. Identify one relationship where you consistently abandon yourself. Maybe a parent whose approval you've chased for decades. Maybe a friend who expects your endless availability. Maybe a workplace dynamic where you've become the person who never says no. This week, introduce one small boundary. One instance where you honor your truth instead of deferring. Doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be honest. Let me give you some examples of what this might look like. Perhaps your mother calls every evening expecting an hour of your time, and you've never told her that some evenings you need to yourself. This week, you might say, "Mom, I love talking to you, but tonight I need some quiet time. Can we talk tomorrow instead?" Perhaps your coworker always asks you to cover tasks that aren't your responsibility, and you've never pushed back. This week, you might say, "I'm not going to be able to take that on." You might check with someone else. These are small moments. They might seem insignificant, but they're not. Each time you honor your own truth, even in a tiny way, you're rewiring a pattern that's been running for years. You're teaching yourself that your needs matter. You're teaching others how to treat you. You're building a new relationship with yourself, one honest moment at a time. You will feel uncomfortable. The old programming will activate. The anxiety will rise. This discomfort is not a sign you're doing wrong. It's a sign you're doing something different. And different feels dangerous to a nervous system that equated accommodation with survival. But discomfort is not danger. Sometimes discomfort is the feeling of finally coming home. I want you to expect this discomfort and welcome it. Don't let it stop you. When you feel that familiar anxiety rising, that urge to take back your boundary, to apologize, to accommodate, take a breath. Remind yourself that this feeling is just your old programming trying to keep you safe in ways you no longer need. Thank it for trying to protect you, and then hold your ground anyway. The discomfort will pass. It always does. And on the other side of it, you'll find something you may not have felt in a very long time. Self-respect. The quiet pride that comes from honoring your own truth. The peace that comes from being honest. The freedom that comes from no longer performing. I want to bring you back to where we started. You said yes again. You felt that contraction in your chest and ignored it. You smiled. You accommodated. You betrayed yourself in a way so familiar you barely noticed. But something is different now. You understand that every time you abandon yourself to please others, you're not being kind, you're being absent. You're choosing exile over presence, performance over truth, approval over your own sacred life. And you understand something else. You have a choice. You've always had a choice. The cage door has never been locked from the outside. You've been the one holding it closed, convinced that what lay beyond it was more dangerous than staying trapped. But you're beginning to see the truth now. The cage isn't keeping you safe. It's keeping you small. It's keeping you from the life that's waiting for you, the life where you show up as yourself, where your relationships are built on honesty instead of performance, where your energy goes toward what matters instead of what's expected. When you change the way you look at yourself, when you stop seeing your worth as something earned through accommodation, everything shifts. Your relationships change because you bring a different self to them. Not a performing self, not an anxious, monitoring self, a real self, a whole self. A self with preferences and limits and needs and the sacred right to all of them. Your work changes because you're no longer performing for approval. You can bring your actual gifts, your actual perspective, your actual contribution, instead of just your compliance. Your entire experience of being alive transforms because you're finally present for it. You're finally here. Not watching yourself from a distance. Not managing other people's perceptions. Not calculating what's required to stay safe. Just here. In your life. Living it. How people treat you is their karma. How you react is yours. You cannot control whether others approve of you. You cannot control their expectations, their moods, their capacity to accept your full humanity. But you can control whether you abandon yourself in pursuit of that approval. You can control whether you stay present with your own truth or exile yourself one more time. Tonight, before sleep, think of one moment today when you weren't fully yourself, when you performed, when you said yes, but meant no. Don't judge it, just see it. Feel what it cost you. Feel the small withdrawal of your own presence, the quiet dimming of your own light. Then ask, what would it have looked like to honor my soul in that moment? What would I have said? What boundary would I have held? What truth would I have spoken? Let yourself imagine it. Feel what it would have felt like to stay present with yourself, to honor your own knowing, to speak your truth, kindly but clearly. Hold that feeling. Remember it. Let it become a reference point, a glimpse of what's possible when you stop abandoning yourself. Tomorrow, when a similar moment arises, and it will choose differently, stay with yourself instead of disappearing. Speak your truth instead of performing agreement. Hold your boundary instead of collapsing into accommodation. It won't be perfect. You'll still say yes when you mean no sometimes. You'll still accommodate when you wish you hadn't. This is a practice, not a destination. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. You're unlearning patterns that have been running for decades. That takes time. But every time you choose yourself, every time you honor your own truth, even imperfectly, you're building something new. You're creating a different relationship with yourself. You're coming home, one small choice at a time. This is the work, not one dramatic transformation, 10,000 small choices to return home, 10,000 moments of choosing presence over performance, truth over accommodation, your own sacred life over the endless pursuit of approval. You have everything you need for complete peace right now. It's not something to earn. It's not something to perform toward. It's not waiting at the end of some long road of self-improvement. It's not hiding behind the approval of others. It's already here. It's always been here, waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself long enough to receive it. Go to a quiet place this week, somewhere you can hear yourself think, somewhere the noise of other people's expectations fades, enough for your own voice to emerge. And listen, really listen, for the sacred melody that's been playing beneath all the noise, your melody, the one that got drowned out by decades of accommodation, the one you learned to silence because it seemed to cause too much trouble, the one that knows your path, your purpose, your way home. It's still there. It's always been there, waiting for you to listen again. Dance to the music you hear, your music. Stop apologizing for the rhythm that is yours alone. Stop waiting for permission from people who were never authorized to grant it. Stop believing that you must earn the right to be yourself. You belong here. You always have. Not because of what you do for others, not because of how well you accommodate, not because of how successfully you perform the role of the person everyone wants you to be. You belong here because you exist, because something sacred looked out at the infinite possibility of creation and chose to express itself as you, not as a performing version of you, not as a people-pleasing version of you, as you, with all your preferences and limits and needs and inconvenient truths. That's enough. That's always been enough. And so are you.